Hola, hola chicos. Hello, and welcome to another class, another Spanish class where we cover all the basics of the Spanish language. Today we are going to have a look at something quite interesting, in my opinion. We are going to have a look at reflexive verbs. Uh, Reflexive verbs are normal verbs that will have some special things the way they work. So, without any further ado, let's go to have a look at it. Vale. What is a reflexive verb? So far, we've seen how to conjugate different verbs. For example, in present, I mean, we've seen verbs like nadar, to swim, and we learned that we have to get rid of the AR ending and then use some endings for the different subjects. So if you want to say, I swim, yo nado. You swim, tú nadas. He swims, él nada. We swim, nosotros nadamos. You swim, vosotros nadáis. And they swim, ellos nadan. So basically, we get rid of the infinitive ending, and then we substitute that ending for other endings that I gave you. I'm going to write down those endings because they're going to be quite useful later. So, ER verbs. ER verbs and IR verbs. And we had endings, and those endings were. I'm going to draw the charts first. Vale. What are the endings for an AR verb? They are O, AS, A, AMOS, AIS, AN. So any verb that we want to conjugate that finishes with an AR, we get rid of the AR and we substitute that AR for those endings. ER verbs. O, ES, E, EMOS, EIS, EN. And IR verbs. O, ES, E, IMOS, IS, and EN. Vale. What's a reflexive verb? A reflexive verb is a verb that will always look like this. It's a verb that it's very easy to spot. It's a verb that will always finish in its original form, in the infinitive, will always have an SE at the end. That's the mark of a verb being reflexive, having that SE. But if you think about it, it's basically a normal verb, levantar, and I have attached at the end an SE, just to differentiate it from a normal verb. That SE is telling us that the verb is reflexive, and that implies that the action is not going to be a normal action. Let me explain that. When you use a reflexive verb, any reflexive verb, like levantarse, that's to get up, it can mean one of these four things. It can mean that an action is done to yourself. For example, if I use the verb to wash, which is the verb lavar, I'm talking about washing my car, I'm talking about washing the windows, I'm talking about washing anything but me. But what if I wash my hair? What if I wash my hands? That is an action that I am doing to myself. So in that case, we no longer we use the verb lavar. We use the verb lavarse. So we would use that verb in a reflexive way. We will use the same verb to wash, lavar, but now it will need to be a reflexive verb, lavarse, so we specify that the action is done to ourselves. If I brush my shoes, to brush is cepillar. But what if I brush my teeth? That is now cepillarse. So it needs to be a reflexive verb just to specify that the action is done by someone to that very same person. It's I call that a boomerang action sometimes because it's an action that goes in this direction and falls on yourself again. That's why I call it a boomerang action. So for all those actions that you do to yourself, we use reflexive verbs. More, we use reflexive verbs when we are talking about reciprocal actions. If the action is done by me to someone, but that same person is doing the action to me as well, it goes in both ways. It's a reciprocal action. I think in English you express it by saying to each other. I help Paul, Paul helps me, we help each other. Well, in Spanish, the verb to help is ayudar, but if you help each other, ayudarse. By making it reflexive, we will specify that that is a reciprocal action. It's done to each other. We will see this in detail, don't worry. I just want to give you all the uses of a reflexive verb and then we will use them. Use number 3. We also use reflexive verbs just to change the meaning of an existing verb. It's just, that's the way the language is. We have a verb, and by making it reflexive, it changes completely its meaning. So, for example, we have the verb quedar, that like this means to meet up with someone. But if you use the verb quedarse, the only thing I've done is transform the verb into a reflexive verb. Now it doesn't mean to meet up anymore. It means to stay in a place. So they don't have anything to do now. Although it's the same verb, I've changed the meaning completely by making reflexive. That's also one of the uses of a reflexive verb. And finally, although this use is the less likely to come across, and I'm going to give it to you anyway. We use also reflexive verbs for emphasis, to emphasize. Emphasis. I don't know if that word is correctly written, but okay, you know what I mean. Sometimes we use a reflexive verb even though we could go without using that verb, only because we want to emphasize that an action, it's been done all by ourselves. For example, the verb limpiar, it's the verb to clean. If I have cleaned the house all by myself, now I can use the verb as a reflexive verb just for an extra emphasis, just to express that something is being done all by myself. Don't worry, because we will cover all these uses one by one later. I want to tell you first how to conjugate a reflexive verb. Because a verb is basically a normal verb. It's simply that it will need one extra little word accompanying the verb. It's a reflexive pronoun, we call them. So, when we conjugate a reflexive verb, we will need a little pronoun before the verb. And those pronouns are me, te, se, nos, os, se. And now the conjugated verb will come. And now the conjugated verb will come. For example, imagine I want to conjugate the one that I gave you before, levantarse, to stand up or to get up. I get rid of the SE that was there just to tell me that the verb was reflexive. And now I get rid of the AR because I don't want the infinitive. So now I have the stem, LEVANT. And now levantar was an AR verb, so I get up. Yo me levanto. You stand up or you get up. Tú te levantas. He gets up or stand up. Él se levanta. We get up or we stand up. Nosotros nos levantamos. You all, you plural, get up or stand up. Vosotros os levantáis. And finally, they get up or they stand up. Ellos se levantan. So that's the way we do it. Let me give you another one. For example, the verb, okay, the verb afeitarse. Okay, the verb afeitar is the verb to shave the beard. But how do I express that I'm not shaving someone's beard, that I'm shaving myself, I'm shaving my own beard? By making the verb reflexive. So how do I conjugate it? I get rid of the SE and also the infinitive ending, and I keep the stem. And now, yo me afeito, tú te afeitas, él o ella se afeita. So I'm basically just using an extra word. I'm conjugating the verb normally, but I'm just using an extra word that is a pronoun, a reflexive pronoun that will always need to go before the verb, right before the conjugated verb. But I'm still using the same normal endings that I've used. And these reflexive verbs will be either regular verb or stem changing verb or even irregular verbs. The only thing that I have to take into account is that those 6 reflexive pronouns will need to be before the verb. So for example, the verb ir, it's the verb to go. But the verb irse, that se makes the verb have a different meaning. It would be use number 3. It changes its meaning. Now it's to leave a place, to leave a place where you were, to go out. So the verb, if I know how to conjugate it, I know how to conjugate irse, because it's basically using these little pronouns before the conjugated verb. This was an irregular verb, but we know how to do it. Yo me voy. I leave. Tú te vas. You leave. Él se va. He leaves, and so on. So a verb being reflexive, it's only a way to express that one of these 4 things is happening, but it's basically a normal verb. Don't worry, because I'll give you a list of reflexive verbs and we will work with them. But it's basically the only thing you have to do is memorize these 6 reflexive pronouns that you will need to place before the conjugated verb, and that's it. and then you have a reflexive verb conjugated. Don't worry, because we will work with this in class, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will have plenty of practice in future videos, and bye bye for now.